questions or comments on anything that I said this morning or didn't say at all? And yeah. Now here's the thing. It's not possible, it just isn't possible that among 60 people, based on all that thick stuff that I gave you, there's no questions. It's not possible. What is possible is that you do have a question or a comment, but there's something inhibiting you from asking it. And just stay with that for a moment. Now, what is inhibiting you from asking it is usually a story, which is that if I ask a question, I will look stupid. Or I'm going to make myself vulnerable if I ask a question. I'll reveal something about myself that I don't want people to know. I don't want to look bad. Now, so those are two possibilities. Either everything I've said is so totally clear to you that you got no question at all, or everything I said is so dense that it makes no sense whatsoever, and you don't know begin what to ask. Okay, those are two possibilities. The third possibility is that there is something there that you'd be interested in, but there's something stopping you, and what's stopping you is those beliefs or something like that. Now, if that is the case, here's an opportunity for you. If you have a belief or an inhibition that if I ask a question, I will be exposing myself, or if you have the belief that if I ask a question, I may look stupid, or might look ignorant, or I might not be able to formulate it in a way that sounds reasonable. If you have those concerns, here's an opportunity to work with it, because those concerns have nothing to do with the present. They actually have to do with the past. If you have those concerns, you're actually still being controlled by what happened to you when you were 3-year-old and your parents made you feel like you're stupid. Where your parents made you feel that you're bothering them, that you're wasting their time because they're so busy and so stressed, so you shouldn't be intruding on them with your particular concerns. If you have those kind of beliefs in you, and a lot of us do, then that means we're still controlled by the past, decades later. So this is not, I'm quite comfortable with you not having any questions whatsoever. I can certainly handle it, and I don't need you to have any questions. But I can tell you that if you have those concerns, it's an opportunity for you to recognize that and possibly to transcend it. Now that's always your choice. It's totally your choice. So I think I've finally got 2 people to have questions. So, so yeah, now we got more hands up. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I don't want to be afraid of my past, so here we go. My question was, after learning, it's sort of a question for anybody in the room that has a learning disability or for the youth we work with. After you found out you had ADD, did that empower you to make any changes in your life? Did it help you, sort of become a different person, or what did you do to change?
Right, thank you. Well, first of all, some people, when they get diagnosed with ADD or anything, they say, oh no, not one more diagnosis. One more thing wrong with me. I didn't need this. That's not how I reacted. I reacted, this is fantastic. Actually, would somebody run out to the bookstore and grab me a copy of Scattered Minds? Would you mind, Audrey? Thank you. Oh, you have one here. Thank you. We got one. Thank you. So let me read you something from the book. In response to your question here. To dip my toe in, this is when I had coffee with this person, to dip my toe in was to know that unawares I had been immersed in it all my life, up to my neck. This realization may be called the stage of ADD epiphany, the annunciation, characterized by elation, insight, enthusiasm, and hope. It seemed to me that I had found the passages to those dark recesses of my mind from which chaos issues without warning, hurling thoughts, plans, emotions, and intentions in all directions. I felt I had discovered what it was that had always kept me from attaining psychological integrity, wholeness, the reconciliation and joining together of the disharmonious fragments of my mind. ADD seemed to explain many of my behavior patterns, thought processes, childish emotional reactions, my workaholism and other addictive tendencies, the sudden eruptions of bad temper and complete irrationality. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm talking about myself here. The conflicts in my marriage and my Jekyll and Hyde ways of relating to my children. So for me, thank you, for me it was a way of really recognizing myself. And I was 54 at the time, and I always had this sense that I had a potential that I haven't fulfilled. And I used to be frustrated by it. And then when I came upon this diagnosis, now I realized why. Now, one of the things I've always wanted to do was to write books. I'm a good writer, you know, and I always wanted to write books. I could never do it because I didn't understand myself enough. I didn't understand how my mind worked. So for me to find out how my mind actually worked was a liberation. It was a real liberation, that I'm not actually limited, but that there's certain mechanisms in my mind that I have to deal with. That actually it's possible for it to me express my potential. I was 54 when I was diagnosed. Since then, I've written 4 best-selling books that have been published in over 20 languages now. And I would not have done it without that diagnosis, because I still would be frustrated not understanding myself. So for me, a diagnosis is never, if it's an appropriate diagnosis, it's never a limitation, it's actually a liberation. Because it explains to me, here's what's going on, how do I learn to understand this, and how do I get to work with it? So for me, it was very much what you said, that it was a way of opening up to my possibilities. And so any of you that are worried about that, no, in order to deal with, in order to grow, you have to actually deal with what's there. So recognizing what's there is an essential beginning. Okay? Thank you. Other questions? Yes. So that we need the mic here.
So you said people have either they attempt to keep relations or to be authentic, right?
Yeah.
And most people sacrifice authenticity for relationship.
That's correct.
Then is it fair to assume that people who sacrifice relationship for authenticity are either diagnosed as, either antisocial, all these other things, or that they're actually the healthier of the 2 options?
It's both, when you talk about people who are diagnosed with that, thank you for the question. People who are diagnosed with antisocial, it's not that they sacrifice the relationship for authenticity. They also don't know how to be authentic. Their withdrawal from relationship is not because they want to be authentic. Their withdrawal from relationship is because they're afraid of relationships. So and why are they afraid of relationships? Because they were very hurt in relationships. And you're very badly hurt, then one way you protect yourself is you just close down and you're not going to open yourself up. And I'll talk about that later, actually. But so the antisocial personality is somebody who is being so hurt that they withdraw. And you'll see this in your shelter sometimes. They won't trust you. They will close down. They will push away from contact. It's not because they want to be authentic. It's because they're terrified of relationships. Because when they were open to a relationship, which is when they were infants, they were badly hurt. Now, so that's one side of your question. The other side of your question is that, yes, sometimes people choose to be authentic, and when they do, they have to give up a relationship. Some relationships. For example, what if you're one of these people that is always nice, and is always serving others, and is always available, and never says no? And then something happens. Maybe you get cancer. Maybe you get depressed. Maybe you just had some therapy and you realize that you're not being authentic. Then you choose to be authentic. Now, choosing to be authentic means that when you feel no, you're going to say no. But all of a sudden, all these people who like you because you're always saying yes don't like you anymore. Well, then you're sacrificing the relationship for the authenticity. Except, what you're going to find is when you become authentic, you're going to attract other authentic people to you. And the people in your life who are willing to handle authenticity will not reject you, they will celebrate you. They'll say, hey, buddy, it's about time. I'm so glad to see you assert yourself. I was worried about you. And the people who can't handle that, they will withdraw from you. So in authenticity, there's always the risk of loss of some relationships. And of course, this is why sometimes people stay in relationship with the wrong people, because they're more attached to the relationship than they are to authenticity. So they suppress themselves for the sake of the relationship. And if they're going to be authentic and the other person can handle it, they'll lose the relationship. The difference is, and here's the huge difference, and this is why your question is so important. The big difference is that when you're a child, you have no choice in the matter, because you're absolutely dependent on a relationship. You're not free to choose anything else. So when it comes to the conflict between authenticity here and attachment there, you have to go for the attachment. You're helpless in the matter. As an adult, you're no longer helpless. When we think that we're helpless, when we think that we're dependent, I need you so badly, I can't live without you. All these pop songs about, I can't live without you. Well, sure you can. The only person that can't live without somebody else is a baby. But the trouble is, it's hard for us to grow up. It's very hard for us not to be babies. In fact, you know what? I mean, the pop songs all, hey, I'm your baby. Well, this is where it's a choice that we make as to do we choose to grow up or do we choose to stay babies? And yeah, sometimes when we choose to grow up, then the people that can't handle it, they will leave us, for sure. Yeah.
What are some of the limits or pitfalls that one or you believe exist in the search for authenticity?
Pitfalls?
Pitfalls that people might believe something's being authentic when in fact they're indulging in habitual behavior or programming or whatever.
Well, I mean, one of the pitfalls is that, or one of the risks anyway, is, as just been said, is the loss of certain relationships in your life. But in terms of pitfalls, some people, when they realize that they haven't been themselves, then they develop some idealized view of what they would look like if they were themselves, and they get attached to some idealized view of it. So now they get attached to some false image. This is where people get into cults. They don't like who they've been, and all of a sudden they want to construct a totally different being. Instead of exploring who they really are and finding out what's really going on, then they identify with something external, like a cult leader or anything. And then, instead of being authentic, they just choose a different, more acceptable way of being inauthentic. That's the biggest pitfall, I think. And so that's why anything can become either something positive or something negative in your life. I mean, you can, for example, follow a spiritual path as a way of becoming authentic, but you can also follow a spiritual path as a way of staying inauthentic by identifying with some idealized image rather than with your true self.
Is there a limit? Do you perceive, is there a quote-unquote a limit to how far one jumps into the waters of authenticity? Like, how far does one leave the world behind, or, in regards to maintaining attachments, or?
Look how you formulated it. You say jumping into the water is like jumping into some kind of a canyon or some dangerous waters. It's not how I experience it. I don't experience authenticity usually as one of jumping. I usually as discovering day by day through some gradual practice and some self-awareness of how we're not authentic. It's not a question of jumping into anything, not in my view, because we already are authentic. You can't not be authentic. You're just not in touch with it. And we have all these defenses and all these mechanisms with which we keep from being authentic, like being nice all the time. So that it's not a question of jumping in, it's a question of uncovering through patient and compassionate, kind, self-observation, the way in which you're not being authentic. So one spiritual teacher says that liberation is not some great thing that you achieve all of a sudden. Liberation happens every time that you realize that you're not your personality.
I think I think by jumping in, I meant in embracing authenticity, in the rapidity of how quickly one could embrace their authenticity, how much quote unquote reserve should they have for what they may or may not, like in regards to fear and really just stepping into it?
There's always fear in moving towards authenticity because we've been taught since children to be afraid of our authentic selves. Because if we're our authentic selves, we're going to lose the world. That's the fear. There's always going to be fear there, and I can't give you a general answer except to say that that fear has to be confronted, has to be recognized, understood, and accepted. It's a process. Thank you. Yeah. Please.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Right. I'm at an awkward stage in my journeys as I approach the beautiful 5-0. And,
You're a baby.
and frontline work.
Yeah.
And I'm faced with, every time I go into a lot of the work, I love doing this. I've been doing this for over 25 years.
Yeah.
I just enjoy it because I love the connection, I love the community, I love that aspect of things. But I realize that as I get into certain, I call them institutions, where they work with, I have a lot of young heads coming out with lots of papers. And I heard you say last night, they have degrees, but they have no connection. And then when I go in and I try to do my pieces from my style, I break rules because they're meant to be broken.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of things that they do that I disagree with,
Yeah.
and how they analyze and a few things that they do that I just disagree with. And when I try to address that, I get this, you're too old, you're not connected anymore, this is what this age group does, and this is what this does, and this is what this does. And I withdraw at times, or I go and I have the conversation, saying, am I taking it personal? Is this, yeah, I am college educated. I do have some university education. But is that all, is everything about that? And I'm wondering, I've been hearing you say a lot of things that we go through is coming from our childhood. So help me to own what that piece is.
Okay, well, thanks for the question. It's a very brave question. Will you stay with the mic for a minute? Just keep the mic with you. What's your name again, sorry?
Elaine.
Sorry?
Elaine.
Elaine, yeah. Thanks for the question. So, I just want to make sure I understand the situation. You're working with younger people who got certain letters after the name that you don't have, but you've got the decades of experience and accumulated wisdom and insight. And they'll be saying or doing things in an intellectual way, but in a way that you feel is disconnected from reality. And you want to call them on it, you want to engage them in conversation about it, you want to challenge them.
I have done that in the past and I've gotten fired.
Sorry? Yeah.
I have done that in the past and I've gotten fired.
No, I got it. And when you do, then they'll tell you that they're educated and you don't know what you're talking about and so on, okay? So how do you deal with that, right? That's the question. So let me ask you this. In relationship to these younger fellow workers of yours that have got all these degrees and these analytical, intellectually honed opinions, how do you feel when you approach them? What's the feeling inside you when you approach them?
A feeling as in, I don't feel any way.
You really don't?
No, well, yeah, I do. In a sense of, let me break it down. In the sense of, I'm like, a couple times, like even one of the general met, I have children older than these young people.
Okay.
And then I said, how do sometimes I don't even know how to start the conversation.
Okay, well, good. Now you're beginning to look at it. That's great.
So I don't know, that's why I said I don't know if it's deep because...
Well, okay, so in that statement, I have children older than these people. What's the sense there?
In a sense, sometimes I feel belittled by, I guess, the position that I'm in versus where they're at.
Uh-huh. So belittled, that means you're littler than they are.
That's how I feel at times.
Right. Now, I got news for you here. Okay? Belittled is not a feeling. Feelings are, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm sad, I'm angry. By the way, I appreciate the work you're doing with me. You're doing it for everybody else here. You understand that? Okay, so that's really great. So what I'm saying is, not, although it's in response to you, it's not personal to you. I'm just talking about general human dynamics here. Okay, but you also apply to you and I. But belittled is not a feeling. Belittled is, feelings are, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm sad, I'm angry. Those are feelings. What is belittled? Yeah? It's what? There's resentment there. Okay, fair enough. We'll come back to that. Thank you. But it's a judgment, as somebody said. So belittled is a perception. It's a point of view. Okay? How do you feel when you perceive that you're belittled? What's the feeling?
Most times frustrated.
Frustration, which includes resentment and anger, and also probably shame. Right? So then you approach them from this position of frustration and resentment and shame. How effective do you think your communication is going to be from that position?
Not very effective.
It's not going to be very effective. Why on earth would they even listen to you? You've already made yourself small and ashamed and angry even before you open your mouth. Why would they listen to you? Now, energetically, they pick up on that. They may not even know it, or to articulate it, but we respond to people's energies much more than we respond to their words. It's your energy that they're responding to. Your energy is toxic at that moment to yourself, and therefore to them. Naturally, they're going to defend themselves. Hey, I'm educated, college, you can't tell me this stuff. That's their defense against your toxic energy. They didn't do that to you. Who did that to you?
I did that to
You did that to yourself. You did that to yourself because, and let me ask you this question, Elaine. This sense of being small and angry and hurt, first time in your life? Or have you had that experience before?
I've had that experience before.
And how far does it go back?
I think from the day I arrived in this country.
At least?
Yes.
And how old were you then?
9.
Okay? And I would argue it goes back even before then. Except you might not recall it. Okay? In other words, when you're confronting, so I understand, you're a black woman from a foreign country. So you got 3 strikes against you. Culturally speaking, in this society. That's a given. Okay? But I also think that there's something more personal to it, which has to do with your own childhood. And then you bring that energy to your interactions, and then you're surprised, and you go, how come they don't listen to me? It's because they got degrees. It's got nothing to do with the degree. It's got to do with the energy transaction. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So the good news, that's good news.
Great news.
Yeah. You see why it's great news?
It's great.
Yeah, because if you recognize that you're actually doing it, if we recognize, not to make it personal to Elaine, if we recognize that we create these situations ourselves, then we can uncreate them just by learning to transform our relationship to ourselves. And that means we transform our interactions as well. Fair enough?
Fair.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next. Yeah, I'm not going to ask a question.
Hi.
Oh, you are? Okay, great. Hi.
My question goes back to the comment about authenticity.
Yeah.
And attachment in the relationships. So just recently, I've kind of discovered that being myself is a lot better than trying to be somebody else.
Really, you found that out, huh?
Yeah, it's weird. It took me like 30 years, so I figured it out. So I found that once I started like speaking my truth, I was one of those yes people
Yeah.
all the time,
Yeah.
saying no when I couldn't do it or when I didn't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I lost a lot of like friends, but the friends that stayed, the relationship was so much deeper and so much better
Right.
than when I had like hundreds of friends. It's
Yes.
so much better now that I have like the 5 or 10.
Yes.
But the thing is, I find that sometimes I still will not be true with certain people to hold on to that relationship. And I'm wondering, why do I still do that? Because I know from experience that the relationships I have with the people that I'm true are way better than the relationships I have or I'm having with the people that I'm trying to be someone else with.
Yeah.
But why do I still do that? And sometimes it honestly, it feels like I'm wearing like you're wearing a corset for some of you women out there. It's like wearing a corset every time you're around that person. Like you can't breathe.
I got it.
But we still do it. Like I don't understand why we still do it, even though we know the positive of not doing it.
I got it. So, when you say that you've discovered the benefits of authenticity, by the way, this book, When the Body Says No, that I've been quoting you from, it's dedicated to my mother, but also to a great Canadian-Hungarian doctor. His name was Hans Selye, and he's the one that did the work on stress. And Selye said, along the lines of what you said, he said that the biggest stresses on human beings are emotional ones, and the biggest stress of all is trying to be who you're not. So that's what you found out. But how long ago did you find that out?
It's kind of sad. I found it out like earlier this year.
Earlier this year?
I was walking.
Yeah.
I was walking by a coffee shop, and it's a coffee shop by my house, and they, on their sandwich board, they always have different, like, quotes.
Oh, yeah.
And one of them said, "Be yourself, everyone's taken. Everyone else is taken." And I was like, ha, 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 that's funny. And I'm, like, walking home, I'm like, I gotta remember that so I could put it on my, like, BBM.
Oh, yeah.
And because I kept remembering it, I was like, that is so true. I
Yeah.
can't, everyone else is taken.
Yeah.
And then through that, I started, like, you know, doing some reading and journaling and stuff like that, and figuring stuff out about myself.
Great.
But-
So that you were just ripe for that
Yeah.
transformation, and that triggered it for you. Okay? So that was earlier this year. Sad you said it was. How old are you?
I just turned 30.
Okay, so how sad that is.
No, it's
Here I'm-
it's
here I'm-
sad because I feel like I look back now on like my high school years and like my college years, and
Yeah.
I'm like, so
Yeah.
many things would have been different
I
if
know.
I had known that back in high school. Like
I know.
that I
and-
didn't need to do what everyone else was doing, you know?
And if a cow had wings, they could fly, you know? I understand what you're saying. There's a sense of loss and regret over a lost possibility. But in fact, consider that those 30 years were your training to be yourself. That's what you had to go through in order to learn. Nothing sad about it. Look, if you're sad, I'm 68. I'm still working on it. You got 38 years on me, you know? But in terms of your question about why it's so difficult, despite what you learn, well, first of all, you're still new at it. You're still learning. So instead of being frustrated with yourself about, like when you say, why am I still like that? Now there's two ways to ask that question. If you say, why am I still like that? If I said to you, why are you like that? Is that a question or a statement? It's a statement. And what is the statement saying? What's that? You're not good enough. So when you ask it like that, you're accusing yourself. You're not actually asking a question. You're making an accusation against yourself that you're not good enough. Right? Now, there's another way to ask the same question. I could ask you, gee, I'm curious. Why do you do that? Why are you like that? Well, what do you suppose, is behind that? Now, is that a question or a statement? That's a question. Which one do you think you're more likely to answer? If I say to you, why are you like that? Why are you still doing this? Or what if I said to you this? What's your name? Kay? What if I said to you, Kay, Hey, Kay, here it is. Here's your 30, and you're an intelligent woman, and you've learned all these things, but I'm noticing that despite what you've learned, you're still doing some of the same things that you used to do before. Now, why do you suppose that is? Now, that's a question. Which one do you think you might more open up to? The first way of putting it or the second way? So that the first thing is, you've got to ask yourself the right way. In other words, you have to ask it with compassion. Remember I said compassion for yourself. Compassionate curiosity. To be really, when you say, why am I like that? That's not a question. That's a statement. I already know. I'm like that because I'm not good enough. But if you ask it compassionately with curiosity, then you might be able to come up with the answer. So I suggest that every time that question comes up for you, ask it with that compassionate curiosity rather than as a self-accusation. Then the answer will come to you. Because otherwise, because if I attack you, what are you going to do? You're going to defend yourself. But if I treat you with compassion, you're going to open up. There's a spiritual teacher who says, I've been quoting him today, he says that only when compassion is present will people allow themselves to see the truth. So if you want to see the truth, you need to be compassionate with yourself. So that's the first point, okay? The second point is, this is a new territory for you. There's stuff you still have to learn. Now the Buddha, who's one of the great teachers of all time, of course, he said, he had this image of two strong men pulling a third one, a weaker one, towards a precipice, and they're going to throw him off into the abyss. And this poor, weaker guy digs his heels into the ground, he tries to resist, but they're stronger than he is. And the Buddha said that those two strong men are what he called our habit energies, the things that we've been habituated into doing all our lives. They're just ingrained in our brains, like fixed patterns. And the weaker guy, he says, is our untrained mind. So if we want to overcome our habit energies, now for you, to suppress yourself in the presence of some people is just a habit that you've learned very early in life, that before you had any choice in the matter. It's ingrained in your brain. There's brain circuits who are telling you that if I'm authentic, that's not good. Those are your habit energies. So that's an automatic behavior for you. And that automatic behavior is there despite what you know intellectually, despite what you've learned. So those habit energies in certain situations will get triggered. Unless you train yourself very patiently. I mean, you wouldn't expect to go into a gym and press 150 pounds on the first day. You're going to press maybe 25 pounds. So right now, you're pressing maybe 75 pounds. You want to press 150 pounds, you have to train yourself some more. Overcome those habit energies. That's all. That's all. Now, as to why some people than others, you might give me an example of who is the kind of person with whom you suppress yourself. I don't